Welcome back everyone to Ein Sof Learning. This is class number 3 of Talmud Eser Sefirot. We're reading from the famous Rav Ashlag's work on the 10 dimensions, the 10 luminous emanations, if you want to call them. We know that a Sefirah is a level of consciousness. And the way we define a level of consciousness is the same way we define a world, or a level of a world. Every world consists of 10 Sefirot. So in this physical world that we find ourselves, there's 9 upper dimensions, just as an example. So let's continue where we left off on the last episode. We're now going to speak about the meaning of makom panui. What is a vacant place? Just to remind yourselves of what we're talking about here. We're talking about a time that precedes time. It's really weird to say that, but that's the metaphor that the Ari uses. He says that this is before the creation of the worlds, which in and of itself doesn't make any sense. How can you say it was before the creation if there's no time? So that's the point to the cause of the creation, this reality of just light, where we really don't know much about it until we experience it. We can learn and read and theorize about it, but until we actually experience that unity, we won't know what it really is. But we're talking about a time, so to speak, in a metaphorical sense, that precedes the creation of the worlds, where the past, the present, and the future are all combined into an eternal moment, and they are one experience, one unified experience. This is before the Tzimtzum, which means before the point in which God created the empty space, within which He then emanates His light in order to create the worlds, in order to create the various levels of existence, which we know from last video, comprise 5 worlds: Adam Kadmon, Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya. But one of the things that he says, the Ari, is that there was no vacant place in this reality. In this reality where it's just light, there is no makom panui. There's makom, there's a place, because this is a place, this is a reality. But it's not panui, it's not vacant. In other words, the place was occupied with light. Every place was occupied with light. Remember, place is not talking about a physical place here. And I will remind you often, but you should just keep it in your mind. We're talking about a reality where there's no time, there's no space, there is no change, there is no directions, there is nothing besides one thing, and that is Or Elyon, the upper light. Simple upper light. So what is a vacant place, so that we can understand what didn't exist before in this reality? There was no vacant place. What does that mean? What's a vacant place? Perush ki beterem shenivra'u ha'olamot shehaya az rak be'Ein Sof baruch hu bilvad kenal. Saying this means that before the worlds were created, there was only the endless. There was only Ein Sof. Lo haya sham makom panui. Dehainu makom chisaron shehaya ra'ui lekabel bo bechinat tikunim. There was no makom panui, vacant place, meaning a place of lack, in which the concept of receiving is possible. The concept of correction is possible. There was no such thing, no such lack that needed to be fulfilled, no such flaw that needed to be corrected. Ki or ha'elyon haya memila et hamakom hahu. For the upper light had filled that place. Shela haniach makom letachtonim lihitgader bo lehosif mashehu al shelimuto. There was no place, there was no space for the lower creations, which are called tachtonim, to distinguish themselves and add something to this completeness. In other words, there was no way to add to the completeness that existed in this light-filled reality which precedes the creation of the worlds. In this light-filled reality which precedes the creation of the worlds, there is no such thing as a deficiency. There's no such thing as a lack. And that's what it means when it says vacant place. There was no vacant place, because the upper light had filled that entire reality. Every space, every place was full of light. Because the concept of lack implies the capacity for reception. If you have a lack, and this is a little bit philosophical, but you can kind of understand it, it is whenever you're hungry that you're able to have a desire or a motivation to eat. If you're not hungry, then that means that you're already full, doesn't it? Therefore, there is no desire to receive. There is no desire to eat. First, there needs to be a space. There needs to be a makom panui. And in the upper light, there was no makom panui. Everything was totally satisfied, because it was a world of satisfaction. It was just light. Light is fulfillment. Fulfillment of what? Of desire. And before the creation, the desire was absolutely fulfilled. An eternal fulfillment. It was an infinite desire with an infinite fulfillment. It was totally in a mode of rest. The light is always in rest. No changes. אלא רק בסיבה הצמצום שעשה, נתחדש אז בחינת חיסרון ונתהווה מקום פנוי לתיקונים. However, only because of the tzimtzum did the concept of lack come into existence. Lack is a product of the tzimtzum, where there is now a requirement for reception, for correction, for tikkun. The concept of tikkun didn't exist before the tzimtzum, because tikkun means correction, but everything was already perfect. There was no need for correction. Tikkun implies that there's something that's imperfect or incorrect that needs to become correct. But everything was correct. There was no need for tikkunim. Aval bal hata'a shebemakom gashmi hasefer medaber. However, do not make the mistake that the book that we're reading from right now speaks of a physical place, a physical space, physical time. Don't make that mistake. Keep catching yourself. The metaphors that we use to explain these deep concepts, which come from a very high level of consciousness. Remember, the people who wrote these books were in the spiritual worlds as they were spewing out this information. So whenever we read it in our vessel, we are not in the spiritual worlds, or we're not conscious in the same way that the wisdom requires. But nevertheless, we filter it through our level of understanding, through our consciousness. And that's necessary. That's how we integrate. Slowly but surely, as we continue to learn, we integrate our life, our experience with these concepts, and we start to become familiar with the energies and the concepts that are spoken about. And then it shifts from being purely conceptual, as it may be right now for us, it's only conceptual, into a spiritual experience. It becomes experiential. And that's knowledge. Now, this portion of where we're reading right now is about to explain to us two concepts, two types of lack. It said that there is no makom panui, such as avir rekani v'chalal. The concept of empty air and a void. Those are two types of lack which the Ari is teaching us that did not exist in the endless. So Rav Ashlag, in the commentary we're now reading, is going to teach us what's the meaning of avir rekani, empty air, and chalal. Ein hakavana al avir gashmi chas v'shalom. So on the concept of avir rekani, empty air, God forbid you should think that we're speaking about a physical air. Right here, we're in a world with air. I might not think I'm touching anything, but I am. I'm moving particles. There's particles all throughout the air. So I'm not talking about physical air. Whenever we're talking about avir, in the spiritual context of the term. It has nothing to do with the physical meaning. That's an important thing to know. Ela yesh bechinat or ruchani hamikone kan. However, there is a spiritual light that is called air. So he's introducing the code word of air. Air is a code word. For what? Ki hina yesh bet bechinot or bekol partzuf shalem. This is how he introduces the explanation. He says you should know that there are two aspects of light in every partzuf, in every complete partzuf. What's a partzuf? A partzuf is a spiritual system. A partzuf contains 10 sefirot. You are a partzuf. Everything is a partzuf. A partzuf is an element that contains within it 10 dimensions. A certain spiritual structure. Spiritual being, spiritual existence, spiritual entity. Every spiritual entity has 10 levels. Remember that for always. And remember, everything that exists in the physical world is a reflection of a spiritual reality. Which means that even the physical things, there's 10 sefirot in them. Within the body, not just that the right brain and the left brain is chokhmah and bina, above in your forehead is keter. Then you have chesed is your right arm, gevurah is your left arm, tiferet is your chest, netzach is your right leg, hod is your left leg, yesod is your brit, malchut is your feet. Not just in that way, but even within the head there's 10 sefirot. Within the head, the eyes themselves are chokhmah, the ears themselves are bina. Da'at is your, if you want to go very deep, you can go. Da'at is your pineal gland. Chesed, gevurah, tiferet, netzach, chod, yesod, arzeir, anpin, that's your nose. Malchut is your peh, your mouth. These might sound so strange for a person who's just starting to learn. Why are we comparing body parts and elements of our physical world to these spiritual concepts, these spiritual energies? Because as you start to learn more and more, you'll see you are the vessel. You are the spiritual system that we're talking about. You are the world, but in a miniature version. You're a microcosm, exactly the way that we've explained. You're a microcosm of the spiritual system that God has created, which consists of 10 dimensions. That's why the answer to all your problems, the remedy for your slavery, exists inside. It's not outside. The 10 sefirot represent the existence that everything that exists within these 10 sefirot. Therefore, you are in existence. You are a spiritual system with 10 sefirot. Keep with me here. I know it's a little bit hard. But this, if you understand this concept, it will save your life with these videos, because it'll help you understand them much better. How do you access the higher energies? How do you access the light that we're talking about here? It's by penetrating the dimensions of your own consciousness. It's all within. The war is within. The war is not outside. What happens outside is a reflection, is a consequence of what goes on in the spiritual realms, which means what happens within your consciousness. Because that's where the real root of all of the problems and the solutions come from. How in touch are you with the light, which is your core, which is your essence? That's the self. Don't want to get too carried away. But let's continue here. Okay. So there's two aspects to every spiritual system, to every partzuf. Number one, or the chokhmah, or the chasadim. And number two, or the chasadim. There's two types of light. One of them is called or chokhmah, the light of wisdom, and or chasadim, the light of kindness. Again, code words. Why is it called wisdom? Why is it called kindness? We're going to get into it right now. Or the chokhmah hu bechinat ha'atzmut shel ha'partzuf. The light of wisdom is the essence of the partzuf. Dahainu bechinat ha'chayut sheba. Meaning the aspect of the vitality within it, the life force, the essence. That's or chokhmah. Or the chasadim hu rak or malbish al or ha'chokhmah shebepartzuf. The light of kindness is only a light that dresses or clothes the chokhmah within the partzuf. The body is or chasadim, while the soul is or chokhmah. Does that make sense? Yes, because it aligns with exactly what we said. Or chokhmah is the atzmut, which means the essence. It's the internal aspect of the spiritual system, which is the soul, for example. And or the chasadim is the light that envelops the light of wisdom. It is a shell, in a way. It's a vessel for the light of chokhmah, which is the body, for example. So there's the internal and there's the external. There's chokhmah and there's chasadim. Ve'or, the chokhmah, eino yechol lehitlabesh bepartzuf im lo yitlabesh techila be'or the chasadim. And the light of wisdom, or chokhmah, is incapable of revealing itself, is incapable of permeating the partzuf, if not for the or chasadim to reveal it. The or the chasadim reveals the or the chokhmah. Let's make it practical. The soul cannot enter this world except through the body. You need a body in order to express the soul in this world. Otherwise, you can't express the soul in this world. Because this world is physical, and the soul is not physical. So, it's specifically through the body, through the Or Chasadim, that the Or Chokhmah, that the soul, the essence, the lifeblood, the Chayut, becomes revealed in this world, in this partzuf. Omnam, however, le'atim, sometimes, keshe hapartzufim hema be'et katnut. However, sometimes, whenever the partzufim are in a state of katnut, smallness, ein bahem ela or de chasadim bilvad. There is nothing inside them except for or de chasadim alone. What is katnut? Whenever you're in a state of smallness, Rav Ashlag says, you don't have or chokhmah. You haven't yet revealed the or chokhmah within you. You're just or chasadim. You're just the external aspect. Interesting. Seems like we're talking about a spiritually developing, it's still developing. It's a being that has not yet reached its essence. It has not yet reached or chokhmah. Or chokhmah is the goal, to reach the essence, which is the light. Or chokhmah is the light. Or chokhmah is or Ein Sof. That's where we want to reach. But sometimes people are not as developed yet. They still have to grow. That's how the world is. We start off in a state of smallness. And slowly but surely we develop, we grow, we expand. We build our vessel. And once the vessel is fully built, then the Or Chokhmah can reveal itself. But until then, we're still in a state of smallness. It's okay. I'm there with you. I'm there with you. And Avram was once there as well. Yisrael was once there as well. All of the tzaddikim, they started off katnut. So whenever we're in a state of katnut, we don't have or chokhmah. V'teda she'or de chasadim ze hu mechona b'shem avir or ruach. And you should know that the light of kindness or chasadim is called avir. It's called air or ruach. Ruach means spirit, but it also means wind. but it's also the second level of your soul, from below to above. There's nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yachida. Nefesh corresponds to malchut. Ruach corresponds to chesed, because chesed is inclusive of chesed, gevurah, tiferet, netzach, hod, yesod, which is the Eitan Pin, and that's the ruach. And then bina is your neshama, your chaya is chokhmah, and your yachida is keter. This is within you. The 5 levels of your own soul, which correspond to the 10 sefirot within you. Each person has their own 10 sefirot. That means each person has a different potential. But the or chasadim, it's called avir. That's the word in Hebrew to describe this energy. Avir. Ubihyoto bifnei atzmo bli or de chokhmah, and when it exists by itself without the light of chokhmah, without or chokhmah, hu mechona b'shem avir rekani. It's called empty air. Klomar shehu reikan mi or de chokhmah, meaning that it's empty of or chokhmah. Let me offer you some imagery here. Imagine a cup, a vessel. The vessel itself is or de chasadim. It's avir. That's called air. But the water, or whatever you fill this vessel with, is called or chokhmah, because that's the essence. That's the internal aspect. Sometimes the vessel has not grown up yet. It still needs to be molded. It's like whenever you go to pottery class, they give you first, I don't know if you've ever seen it, they give you just a bunch of clay. They don't give you a cup. They don't give you a bowl. No, they give you clay and then you have to form it. But before you actually form it, it's just a block of clay here. That's what it means to be in the state of katnut. We're like clay that hasn't yet formed, hasn't yet made space within it, hasn't yet created the vessel. You haven't yet built your vessel. For that reason, you are empty of or chokhmah. You're empty of the capacity to receive. You cannot receive. You can only receive as much as you have a vessel for it. So you don't have the vessel, you don't have the light. That's a rule in spirituality. So let's continue here. Tzafa she'or ha'chokhmah yitpashet betocho v'miluuno. And it waits. The or chasadim waits for the or chokhmah to spread within it and fulfill it. Umishmiyanu harav, and from what the rabbi has said, referring to the Ari, from what the Ari has said, sheterem shenivra'u ha'olamot, that before he created the world, dahainu be'ein sof baruch hu, meaning in the endless, lo hayta bechinat avir rekani ze b'mitziyut klal. There was no avir rekani, there was no such thing as a or the chasadim, which had not yet attained or the chokhmah. Mishum she'ein sham chisaron keshehu kemevoar. Because there is no lack, as you know. There is no lack in the Ein Sof. Therefore, there's no such thing as a or chasadim which lacks or chokhmah. We are a or chasadim that lacks or chokhmah. The truth is, we haven't even reached or chasadim, if you want to be honest. We haven't. Remember, if you have the vessel, you would have the light. So if we were really prepared, in the sense that we had reached the or chasadim, that vessel, because or chasadim is the vessel. If you really embody the attribute of chesed already, then you would have already revealed the or chokhmah. The truth is, we are on a journey, and that's fine to recognize it. We're not there yet, and we're still growing. But we have to be on a learning structure, program, that eventually will lead us to where we need to be, which is chesed. We need to reach chesed, which means love thy neighbor as thyself, which means attain the ruach, perfect your midot, emulate the attributes of God. These are all synonyms for reaching chesed, which is necessary in order to receive chokhmah. Chesed is the kli. Chesed is the external aspect. And we need the external aspect. We need the vessel first before we're able to contain within it the vitality, the Or Chokhmah, which is the goodness, which is the light, which is Hashem. I don't know how else I can say it, but this is the best imagery. This is the best imagery. We are still growing. We're still developing. And we need to build our vessel. We have to reach chesed. Because God wants to make this world with chesed. A world of kindness. So we have to be on a learning program that with a rabbi, with a proper rabbi, who he himself has already attained those levels. He knows what it's like. He knows how to help you get there. It can't just be you go to any rabbi. Not any rabbi knows Talmud Eser Sefirot. Not every rabbi knows Etz Chaim. Etz Chaim. You have to be worthy to know the tree of life. You have to be very worthy and holy on a very great big mission to be having the merit to learn this wisdom. So if you have access to a rabbi who knows this wisdom, jump on him. So that's the meaning of Avir Reikani. I could keep going and talk about the meaning of Halal here, but I want to let this digest within you. It takes time to download this information in a way that you will understand it. Repeat the video multiple times if you need to in order to understand what we're talking about here. Avir Reikani is a reference to a vessel that lacks Or Chokhmah, which lacks light. There was no such thing as a vessel that lacks light before the Tzimtzum. In the Ein Sof, all vessels were full of Or Chokhmah. All Or the Chasadims were fulfilled with light. There was no Avir Rekani. There was Avir, but the Avir was fulfilled. Therefore, it didn't exist as a separate entity. In the Ein Sof, there's no such thing as differences. There's no such thing as separations. You cannot point at something and say this is a chair and that is a camera and this is chesed and this is gevura. No, there's no differentiations in the Ein Sof. The differentiations only came with the Tzimtzum, the revelation of differences, the revelation of all the different names and appellations of Hashem. They only came into existence after the Tzimtzum. Before the Tzimtzum, everything was echad. Echad doesn't mean shnaim. Echad doesn't mean shalosh. Echad means echad. It means one. That means take everything, all the multiplicities, and condense them into a singularity. And that singularity is all that exists. And there's no differentiations. There's no past. There's no future. There's just one thing, and that's the eternal moment, what we call the light. I like speaking poetically. It's kind of fun. But anyways, that's Avir Reikani. Join me in the next episode to learn what is Halal, the meaning of a void, which also did not exist before the Tzimtzum. I'll see you in the next video.